Can I just name a trust as the beneficiary of my IRA and call it a day? That's a question I hear all the time. And on the surface, it sounds like a smart move. Simple, clean, and controlled. But here's the thing. After the Secure Act, this strategy got a whole lot trickier. What used to be a straightforward legacy planning technique has now become one of the most misunderstood and potentially costly moves families make. And unfortunately, many people don't realize the tax trap until it's too late. If your trust isn't set up properly, you could be triggering a tax nightmare for your family. Instead of giving them time and flexibility, you might saddle them with a huge tax bill and zero control. Today, I'm going to walk you through what's really going on under the hood when you name a trust as a retirement plan beneficiary. I will show you the hidden pitfalls to avoid, and more importantly, the strategies that can potentially save your beneficiaries tens of thousands in unnecessary taxes. Prior to 2020, most people could inherit an IRA and stretch the distributions over their lifetime. That meant smaller, manageable RMDs and years of tax-deferred growth. It was the perfect setup. Protection, control, and tax efficiency all wrapped into one strategy. But the Secure Act of 2019 flipped that upside down. Now, unless the beneficiary is your spouse, a disabled person, a minor child, or someone close to your age, they have to empty the account within 10 years. That's a huge shift in how inherited retirement accounts are taxed. For example, if your adult child inherits a 1 million IRA, they will be required to withdraw and pay taxes on roughly $100,000 each year for a decade. Depending on their other income, that could easily push them into a much higher tax bracket, costing them far more than expected. Then came Secure Act 2.0, which added a few planning opportunities, especially for surviving spouses and disabled beneficiaries, but also a lot more confusion. And if that's not enough, we've got IRS regulations, some final, some still in draft, that further affect how trusts are taxed. It's a constantly moving target, and that's why what worked for your neighbor or even your own plan 5 years ago might not work anymore. Here's what that means in practice. You can still name a trust as your IRA beneficiary, but the trust has to meet very specific requirements, and the people named in the trust matter a lot. If you are starting to wonder whether your trust still works under today's rules, you are not alone. We offer a quick estate clarity meeting to help you review your setup and avoid any surprises down the road. There is a link in the description if you want to get ahead of this. Now, let's talk about what makes a trust work or not work with retirement accounts. If you want the IRS to treat your trust like a person, or what they call a see-through trust, then it has to meet 4 very specific criteria. First, it has to be valid under the state law. Second, it needs to be irrevocable at your death. This prevents changes that could undermine the tax structure or allow heirs to shift the payout terms retroactively. Third, the beneficiaries must be identifiable. That means you need to name or describe them clearly enough that the IRS knows who you're talking about. And finally, you've got to get the trust documentation to the IRA custodian by October 31st of the year after you die. If you miss that deadline, you lose the ability to stretch the distributions. But even if you check all those boxes, there is still one more layer. What type of trust is it? A conduit trust is the simpler of the two. It works like a pipeline. Any money that comes out of the IRA immediately goes to the beneficiary. The trust can hold onto it. That usually means lower taxes, because the income is taxed at the beneficiary's individual rate. An accumulation trust, on the other hand, lets the trustee hold onto the money inside the trust. They can hold onto the distributions, invest them, and release them over time. But here's the trade-off. Income retained inside the trust is taxed much more harshly. Trust hits the top federal tax rate of 37% at just $15,650 of income in 2025. There's also something called an age 31 trust, a hybrid structure that gives the trustee flexibility early on, but requires the trust to terminate and distribute all assets by the time the beneficiary turns 31. That means it's treated like a conduit trust for tax purposes while still allowing for control during the beneficiary's younger years. Each of these trust types has its place, but using the wrong one can cost your heirs dearly. And here's one more important tax nuance. The high trust tax rates only apply when income stays inside the trust. If the trustee distributes the income to the beneficiary in the same year it's received, the tax liability can be passed through and taxed at the beneficiary's personal rate, which is often much lower. That's a key lever trustees can use to manage the overall tax impact. Let me give you an example to illustrate why this matters. Martin was 77 when he passed away early in 2025 and had a 1 million IRA. His estate plan named the trust as the IRA Beneficiary, with the intent of supporting his daughter Em, who was 26, while also leaving something for his brother Peter and the local hospital foundation if Emma doesn't survive. The trust was written as an accumulation trust. That means the trustee could manage the IRA distributions inside the trust rather than paying them straight to Em. Here's where things got complicated. Peter was 75, an EDB, eligible designated beneficiary under the IRS rules. Emma wasn't, and the hospital? That's a charity, which isn't even a person in the eyes of the IRS. Because Martin passed away after the required beginning date, age 73 in his case, the trust had to start taking annual required minimum distributions right away, every year for the first 9 years, and the account had to be fully emptied by the end of year 10. But instead of using Emma's life expectancy, which would have produced smaller, more tax-efficient withdrawals, the IRS required the RMDs to be calculated based on Peter's shorter life expectancy. Why? Because there was a mix of beneficiaries, and the presence of the charity, which isn't a person under IRS rules, disqualified the trust from treating any of them as eligible designated beneficiaries. The result, the trust had to withdraw more money each year, the tax bill went up, and Emma got less. And just to be clear, if the trust hadn't qualified as a see-through trust at all, the tax outcome could have been even worse. The IRS would have treated it like a non-person beneficiary, eliminating stretch options entirely. That's why it's so important to get the structure and documentation right. Now imagine if Martin had structured things a little differently. If instead of naming Peter and the hospital as remainder beneficiaries, he had chosen Emma's cousin Maya, who was also 26, the entire group of beneficiaries would have been closing age. That could have allowed the trust to base distributions on Emma's life expectancy, resulting in smaller withdrawals and much lower taxes. Another solution would have been using a conduit trust. That would have made Emma the only counted beneficiary for RMD purposes. She'd receive the distributions each year directly and be taxed at her personal rate. Or if Martin still wanted control but better tax treatment, he could have used an age 31 trust. This structure would have given the trustee more discretion early on, but as long as the trust ended by Emma's 31st birthday, the IRS would treat it like a conduit trust. Each of these changes seems small, but the tax impact is massive. We are talking about a difference of tens of thousands of dollars over just a few years. Now, if Martin's account had been a Roth IRA instead of a traditional one, the rules would be much more favorable. Roth IRAs do not require RMDs during the owner's life, and after death, even though the 10-year rule still applies, there are no annual RMDs during that window. That means the trust can let the Roth grow untouched for a full decade before taking any distributions. This is a huge advantage, especially for accumulation trusts. The trustee can maximize tax-free growth and wait until year 10 to distribute everything if it fits the family's needs. No taxable income, no annual paperwork, no headaches. Roth plus trust equals powerful combo when done right. This is why Roth conversions can be such a powerful planning tool when trusts are involved. Pay the tax now, lock in certainty, and give your heirs the cleanest, most flexible inheritance possible. Let's circle back to that hospital Martin named. If Peter had passed away before Martin, the hospital would have become the next beneficiary. That one change could have triggered some unfortunate tax treatment. The IRS doesn't treat charities as designated beneficiaries. So when a charity becomes a beneficiary of an IRA, whether directly or through a trust, you often lose access to stretch options entirely. For Roth IRAs with a charity as a beneficiary, the account must be fully emptied in 5 years. That shortens the growth window and can reduce the long-term benefit of the Roth. For traditional IRAs, distributions might be based on the original owner's remaining life expectancy, which can be much shorter than a young beneficiary's. That's why it's critical to think through when and how you include charitable gifts in your estate plan. Great intentions can create tax inefficiencies if they are not structured carefully. A better option for the charitable inclined, a charitable remainder trust, or CRT. Instead of naming the charity directly, you name a CRT as the IRA beneficiary. The CRT is a tax exempt, So when it receives the IRA, no income tax is due right away. The CRT then pays a fixed percentage, let's say 10% annually for a term of years or for the beneficiary's lifetime. After that, the remainder goes to your chosen charity. It's a win-win. The beneficiary receives regular income, the IRA avoids immediate taxation, and the charity ultimately receives a meaningful gift. And as long as the charity is projected to receive at least 10% of the total value, the IRS gives it the green light. Look, naming a trust as the beneficiary of your retirement plan can be an incredibly smart move, but only if you understand the rules. If you get it wrong, you risk higher taxes, less flexibility, and missed opportunities. But if you get it right, you can control how assets are used, protect your heirs, and still pass on a legacy that lasts. Conduit, Accumulation, Roth IRAs, CRTs, each one of these tools serves a different purpose. The key is choosing the right combination for your family's needs. If you thought this was helpful, make sure to check out this video. It's all about the often overlooked steps in funding a trust correctly, and how skipping just one of them can unravel your entire estate plan. Trusts are only as strong as the assets they hold, so don't miss it.